Hello, welcome to my channel Christian Faith and Fiction. My name's Lou and today I just want to share with you some Christian fiction books that I've been reading recently and one book of the Bible. I've had several weeks of really sort of up and down reading my ratings, high, low, well, high, medium and DNF. So there's quite a mixture in there, different genres as well, so for you to look at. I've been recording my book reviews as I've been going along, so we'll see how we get on with that one in a moment. But first of all, I'll just go through the DNFs that I did. These are the books I did not finish and I'll explain why. The first one is Memory Lane by Becky Wade. This is a contemporary romance book, and from the start one of the main characters is practicing yoga, and so I've kind of gone to the place now where I've got like a 2 strikes and you're out sort of thing, so I kept on reading after that one, but then they were suggesting that one of the other main characters goes and does a session of hypnosis, and so I was just like, no, I don't want to read this anymore. It's not going to be something that I enjoy if characters are like participating stuff that I wouldn't participate in as a Christian. We had a good discussion on Goodreads. Some people said they thought that character probably wasn't meant to be a Christian, but it was listed as Christian fiction and it wasn't clear to me that character wasn't a Christian at the beginning. So anyway, I DNF'd that one, and then for a similar reason I also DNF'd The Sweet Life by Suzanne Woods Fisher. This is another Christian contemporary romance where the main character is practicing yoga. In this case, she is actually described as being a strong Christian with a strong Christian faith, but also practices yoga, and no comment was made on that. And I just felt like if I was a new Christian coming into reading this, I would read that and think, oh, it's okay for Christians to be participating in Hindu yoga as well, and all the sort of mind stuff that goes with that, and all the chants, and maybe Buddhist meditation and everything, and just mix up my faith with other things. So I wasn't comfortable with that, so I stopped reading that one. And then also Oath of the Brotherhood by Carla Laureano. This is I think it's Christian fantasy. It's a fantasy book, and when I sort of got into it, the magic system is based around magical charms. And for me, magic charms in the real world, they are used by witches and witchcraft in that. So I can't separate, when I'm reading about fantasy, I can't separate that from the real world. It just makes me uncomfortable, so I didn't read that one either. So let's have a look at the other books that I have read. Mixture of 5 and 4-star books, so that was good. Hi, I finished reading Just Look Up by Courtney Walsh. This is a Christian contemporary romance book, and this is the first Courtney Walsh book that I have read. I believe that some of her books that she writes are clean fiction and some are Christian fiction, and when I tried to look it up on Amazon, it looked like the ones that are published by Tyndale are all Christian fiction and maybe the other one's not. I'm not totally sure on that one, but it looked like that might be the case. This one is a Christian fiction one. It is following Lane, who is working in a interior design firm in Chicago, and she is trying to push for a promotion. She's at the beginning of the book about to do a presentation to try and win over a very important client, and as she's going into the presentation, she's going to try and win the client. She's also going to try and get a promotion out of the back of it. So it's really important to her and the firm. And then just as she's about to do the presentation, she gets a phone call to tell her that her brother has had a motorcycle accident and is in a coma in hospital, and she needs to come right now, or no, he might not make it. She needs to go straight away, and so she has to make the decision of whether to continue with her presentation or go back home. And she doesn't get on with a lot of her family. She hasn't been home for like 2 years. She doesn't want to go back there. She has bad memories of it, doesn't want to reconnect at all, but her brother, who's in a coma, is the one that she's closest to. And basically she gets the presentation moved to another time and decides to go back home to Harbour Point, which is like, I suppose, a small town on the lake. When she gets there, she's having to deal with her family she hasn't seen for ages. There's obviously a lot of tension that's gone on in the past. You don't know at the beginning of the book what's gone on in the past, what's caused all these family relationships to break down. Why is she so work driven and sort of isolating herself and kind of snarky and bitter, and you don't know any of that at the start. Then the other main character is Ryan, who was Lane's brother Nate's friend, who he was also in the motorbike accident, and he wakes up in hospital and finds that Nate is unconscious and he's sort of left. He's injured, but he's not that badly off by it, and he and Lane are sort of reconnecting their friendship as she is stuck there in Harbour Point and where she doesn't really want to be. So the book is following their sort of friendship as it develops, and there's a lot of family dynamics and finding out about the past and character study, really, of what turned them into the characters that they are right now in the present. So it's told from both of their perspectives, and we get the present day story that's taking place, but we also get flashbacks to the past as well. There's it's not, if you think of contemporary romance scale, it's not on the cute fluffy romance side. It's not really sort of heavy depressing side. It's somewhere in the middle. There is like a heaviness and a depth of feeling, like negative feelings and things that they're dealing with. There is some drama in there as well, and conflict. There's quite a lot of conflict, interpersonal conflict and soul searching and stuff going on. So it's kind of in the middle of that is that middle space between those two types of contemporary romance. There is some faith content in there as well. There's this, sprinkling of it here and there throughout the book, and the characters are kind of reflecting on their faith as well at times. I really liked Courtney Walsh's writing. I would definitely read something more by her again. I liked the style of the contemporary romance. I liked that there was a bit of meat to it, a bit of drama to it, a bit of conflict to it. So yeah, I enjoyed that. I found the character of Lane to be a bit unlikable, and I think Courtney does quite a good job of making you sympathetic towards her and feel for her and understand why she is like she is. But I did get frustrated with her at times. I thought she could have changed a bit quicker. I thought, I got a bit frustrated with her. So I'd be interested to read another book by Courtney Walsh with a different main character as well. But as I said, I really enjoyed it. I flew through it. It was a really quick read and really kind of compulsive reading story. So I enjoyed it. But I would give it like between a 4 and a 4.5 stars. So I'll give it 8.5 out of 10 for story enjoyment rating. I'll give it 4 stars on Goodreads, and 2 out of 3 for Christian faith content. So I finished reading The Orphans Wish by Melanie Dickerson. This is book 8, I think, in the Hagenheim series. This is sort of inspired by the story of Aladdin. It's Christian medieval young adult romance, and it's following the character called Aladdin, who is a little boy who loses his mum, and then while he's sort of on the streets, a guy picks him up, a bit like the Fagin kind of character, wants him to steal for him, and he's going to go and steal for someone, and they catch him. The guy turns out to be a priest from Hagenheim who decides to rescue Aladdin, take him away from getting involved in a life of crime, and take him to Hagenheim. He grows up there in the orphanage there, and the Duke's family warm to him, and one of the Duke's daughters, Kirsten, becomes his particular sort of best friend, and they sort of grow up together. Aladdin always wants to protect her, but at the same time he also wants to make his fortune and prove himself. He never feels like he's quite worthy of her or other people. So he is making decisions of whether to stay around with her or to go off and make his fortune, and yeah, that's how the story continues. I would say it's inspired by Aladdin rather than a retelling for me, because the characters are very similar. A lot of them have very similar names to the Disney films, and their sort of motivations fit in with those characters. But I felt like the storyline, the plot line, kind of goes off on its own sort of story, and maybe very loosely follows Aladdin, but I found it quite hard to fit the two together, so I'm thinking of it more of its own sort of story. I really enjoyed the characters in this book, and that's really what carried me through. I enjoyed big chunks of the story, but I did find it a bit disjointed compared to other ones in this series, and the ending I found a bit haphazard and a bit messy. Yeah, as I say, I enjoyed parts of the stories. It felt a bit like, you know, when you get like a house and there's like an original house, but then there's like extensions built onto the house that don't quite fit with the original house. Almost felt like there's a chunk of the story which I was really into, and at one point I thought, oh, this is going to be like a 9 out of 10 story, but then it got quite messy and disjointed, like just bits of stories, and I enjoyed all the bits of stories really, but it didn't flow quite so well. So in the end I give it a story enjoyment rating of 7 out of 10, and there is Christian content in there that's throughout the book, and so that was good. So I give that one 3 out of 3 for Christian faith content. Not my favourite of the series, but I still enjoyed reading it. I reread the Wonderland Trials by Sara Ella, and loved it again the second time round. I have done a review for this one last year when I read it the first time, but briefly, this is a Christian fantasy / dystopian. It's a more contemporary fantasy novel, and it's all the magic system and all the world and everything is inspired by, based around the Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. And it has a lot of characters which reference that the sort of magic system is based around things from that book. So although there is at one point, there's one mention of the word potion, which could be related to witches in other contexts. In this context, it's more to do with like cups of tea. So it's really eccentric, really mind-bending, trying to get your head around it and imagine everything, because there's a lot going on, but I still loved it the second time around. I remembered the most of the big twists in it, but there's a whole load of the details, and some of the twists I didn't remember at all. I was like, oh, I don't remember anything this. So I'm glad that I reread it. Hopefully I'll remember it again before the sequel comes out, and I really want to read the sequel now. But that one I don't think I'll be able to get hold of until October, so hopefully I'll still remember it in a few months' time. But yeah, I'd still give it, for the second time round, I'll give it 9 out of 10. I gave it 9.5 out of 10 for the first reading. Obviously, it's not quite the same when you're reading it the second time round. And I reckon I saw more of the sort of Christian allegory in this time round, reading it through, which was fun. And there definitely is like allegorical things going on in that book. She even sort of dedicates it at the beginning. For the Father who gave me life, you are the King of Hearts. Thank you for saving mine. Is how she sort of dedicates it at the beginning. So that will give you a clue as to how things fit in this book. I really hope if the second one lives up to this first book, it will be definitely up there as one of my favourite Christian fantasy speculative type of books. Hey, so I've just finished reading or listening to The Prince of Spies by Elizabeth Camden. This is the third book in her Hope and Glory series, so I finished the series now. It is a sequential series, so you will need to read from book 1 to book 3 in order. They each have an individual story with the main characters that concludes in each book, but there isn't another sort of overarching story which concludes carries on through all the books and kind of finishes up in the third book. So I'm going to be careful about what I say, trying not to spoil anything from the series, but this book is following two characters who are from opposite families in this kind of family feud that's going on, and it's a historical Christian fiction book set in Washington DC in like the 1900s, so 1904, something like that. So it's that kind of era, and it's following two families who are on opposite sides. They have business, they both have businesses, and they are kind of competitors, and there's a long ongoing feud that's been going on for a while. One of the characters is from one side of that feud and the other is from the other, so there's like a Romeo and Juliet type of romance going on in there. There's also conflict within the families. There's a specific kind of head-to-head conflict that ends up going on, and to do with their companies as well, stuff coming out. So this was my favourite book in this series. I loved it all the way through. The first two books I gave 4 stars to. This one I gave 5 stars. I was looking for something, trying to think, was there anything I didn't like about it? But actually there wasn't. I enjoyed it all the way through this time, and I enjoyed the characters as well. Both quite kind of interesting characters with different flaws as well as good points to them. They kind of meet as one of the characters is trying to rescue a dog on the ice that's fallen into the river, and the other one comes and helps save them. And then it's only a bit later when they start to connect a bit that they realise they're from opposing families, and it's not going to be very good. There is personal development that goes on throughout the book. There is also faith that develops with the kind of personal development as well. So I've given it 10 out of 10 for story enjoyment rating and 2 out of 3 for Christian faith rating. There's definitely evident that the characters are Christians throughout the book, but it's not like the main plot of the book. It's not the main point of the story. So yeah, I was really glad that I finished off this series. I would definitely read another series by Elizabeth Camden in the future. I think they sort of settle around different cities. So this one was Washington DC. I think there might be one in New York, maybe Chicago, not sure. So yeah, I'm going to take a look at when her next book comes out. I think it's the first book in the series. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and I listened to it on audiobook as well, which was good. Hey, I finished reading The Story Peddler by Lindsay A. Franklin. This is a Christian fantasy book, the first book in the Weaver trilogy, and I really enjoyed this one. I was so glad to find a Christian fantasy that I enjoyed and that I felt comfortable reading. It is like a medieval type of era fantasy. The magic in it is what I would call gifted magic or superhero magic, which is the type of magic where someone's sort of born with a gift, a supernatural gift, and they have to learn how to train to use it. Not something that everybody just can learn by doing certain things, but something that particularly individual people are gifted at. And usually that's a bit more of a safe bet for me with Christian fantasy. So this book is following Tanwyn, who is a story peddler, and she has a gift of, when she tells stories, coloured ribbons and lights and things like that come out of her hands and her body and go up into the air and sort of entertain people and tell the story with her, and then they, at the end of the story, if she tells it correctly, they come together and they crystallise into a sculpture, and then she then sells those sculptures to the people who have been watching. So she is she has got this she's like an apprentice to this other peddler who is not so nice, but is keeping her in business, and they're travelling around, and then one day she tells a story and something goes wrong, something happens, and it basically puts her in danger, because the land is either the king has decided there are only certain stories that can be told. Anything outside of that is banned, and you will get into a lot of trouble for it. So that's kind of how the story starts. There are a lot of different characters involved. We get to see a lot more of what's going on in the world, the mysteries surrounding what's happening in the kingdom, the mysteries surrounding individual characters and their past and how they've ended up where they are. And there's romance and complicated romance between different people. And yes, there's a lot going on. It's quite a lot of layered stuff going on in that kingdom. There are different tribes, and there's some kind of racial tension between different peoples. There's tensions in the world. There's also interpersonal tensions between people who are enemies and also people who are on the same sides. And yeah, there was a lot going on in it. I felt like it was really rich in terms of all of the world and the characters, and the magic for me felt I was comfortable with it, and it didn't go into anything that I felt was too much towards the occult, which was really good. I felt like the book was very immersive. I definitely could see all the colour strands going around whenever I was reading those kind of parts. I really could visualise it, the whole story really clearly, and see everything. The main parts of the story are written in first person by Tanwyn, following the character Tanwyn, and I could really hear her voice in my head. For some reason she always spoke in an Irish accent to me as she was speaking, so that's what the voice I was hearing in my head reading the story to me. So I don't know whether that was the inspiration for that. I don't know if that's anything, Lindsay Franklin thought about that at all, but that's what my subconscious interpreted it as. But it felt really sort of very immersive and real to me, so that was good. There is some violence in here. As I said, there's also racial prejudices as well. I'm really interested to see how this story is going to progress in the second two books, and the way that it ended left me with some questions that would definitely need to be answered in the rest of the series. So I'm going to give this one 9 out of 10 for story enjoyment rating and 3 out of 3 for Christian faith rating. It is an allegory. It's there's definitely good versus evil in there. There's also a conflict between people who believe in one creator god and those who believe in multiple goddesses, and that does play quite a strong part in the story, and that kind of allegorical conflict of beliefs I felt was quite strong throughout that story and did have a big impact on it. So I finished reading Can't Help Falling by Kara Isaac. This is a Christian contemporary romance. It is set in Oxford in England, and it's following Amelia, who is wanting to start her life over. She's American. She moves to the UK, to Oxford, to try to do something to make up for some of the mistakes she's made in her life. She tries to get a job working for a charity, raising money for the charity to try and bring it back to life again. It's all connected to things that have happened, and I don't want to say too much about that. But then she meets Peter, who was a high elite rower, but he's injured his shoulder, so he's not able to do that at the moment. But he's still working with rowers at Oxford for the boat race. If you're not familiar with the boat race, the annual Oxford-Cambridge boat race is very famous in the UK, and I am obviously a supporter of Oxford. I have connections with Oxford, so so they meet up. They're both holding secrets from each other, and one of them is a Christian, the other one is not, and so the one who's a Christian is just constantly having to hold back and try not to give in to their emotions. The other one doesn't believe in God, and there is a sort of faith journey that they take mostly through the second half of the book. So that was a strong part of the book. I also really loved that they both loved Narnia, and that kept popping up all the way through, like quotes from the Chronicles of Narnia and different things kind of tied in with the story with that one. I also loved the Oxford references and the boat race references as well. So I enjoyed the story. Because they were holding on to secrets that the reader knows about but the characters don't know about, made me slightly anxious all the way through the book most of the way, because just kept thinking that I can't see how this is going to end well, and it made me slightly nervous and anxious reading the book, so I wasn't fully able to relax and enjoy it in the same way. But I really did enjoy the ending, and I felt like it was mostly believable. So yeah, I did enjoy that one. I would give it 7 out of 10 for story enjoyment rating, and as I said, it does have a strong faith element, which does make a big difference to the story. It does play a major role in it, so I would give a Christian faith rating of 3 out of 3. 2 of the side characters in this book are from her previous book that she published, was Close to You, and so you don't need to have read this one in order to read this one, but if you are planning to read both, I would say read them in publication order. So read Close to You first, which is about a couple that sort of bond over Tolkien in New Zealand, and then read Can't Help Falling after that. And finally, our book club, sort of informal book club on YouTube, has been reading through the book of Romans this last month for our book, and I chose to get out my journaling Bible. This is one there. It is the NIV Journal The Word Bible by Zondervan, and it is kind of decorated on the sides and things, but it's just a regular journaling Bible. I use it for praying through the Bible. So I've been sort of highlighting verses as I go and then writing prayers inspired by that. And yeah, I've just been enjoying getting into it again, enjoying just sort of having a lighter way of going through it. So praying through it was a bit lighter than doing like an in-depth Bible study on it, but just reminded again about the love of God, and especially Romans chapter 8. I did dwell on that for a while, and being reminded that we are if we are Christians, we are no longer under condemnation. We are children of God. That's our identity. We have the Holy Spirit who raised Christ from the dead living inside of us, and we are adopted into God's family, and nothing can take away the love of God from us. And so good to be reminded of that again. I can't like rate the Bible. That would be, crazy, but some books obviously it's easier to get things from than others. This one is just full of stuff that I love, and as well as some other kind of stuff that's it's more, it doesn't kind of jump out the page quite so easily to you, the debates between that Paul is kind of addressing between the Jewish and the Gentile elements of the Roman Church. And it's interesting to look at the history of that and how that came about with, I think it was Emperor Nero one of the emperors banned all the Jews from Rome. And so what was a Jewish church became a completely Gentile church. And then when the Jews were allowed to come back in, there was sort of tensions in the church between the Jews and the Gentiles. And Paul kind of goes through those kind of things, but in the midst of all that goes through the basics of the gospel and how all of us have fallen short, whether we come from a religious background or whether we have come from a completely atheistic background. We've all fallen short of God's perfect mark, and we all need a saviour, and we all need Jesus and his death and resurrection to save us. And it's just through putting our trust in him that we are saved, and then that changes everything for us. And yeah, it's really good to be reminded of those things and to pray through those things again. So those are all the books that I've read recently. I hope my reviews and my sort of thoughts are helpful for you to know whether there's something you would want to pick up in the future. And let me know in the comments your favourite book that you've read recently, and if any of the books that I've read, you've read, also chat down in the comments. No spoilers for the case of, you know, just in case other people are reading the comments, but let me know what your thoughts are and what you rated them down there. Okay, I hope you're having a really great reading week, and until next time, pray God bless you and your family.